Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus Day, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about definitions of words. Now, words have been sort of hijacked and subverted and perverted in the modern sort of desperation to achieve narrative control. And one of those words that's been perverted far beyond its original meaning is genocide. That's a word that everyone likes to. We've been genocided. They're trying to genocide, and it's supposed to give the person uttering the word some sort of higher moral authority, and to reduce the moral standing of those who are being accused. The United Nations is very big on this, but the original use of the word genocide, or how it's been used for a long time and interpreted and defined for a long time, is the killing off of an entire group of people or certain population or whatever. And we can look at things like in say modern times, the Rwandan genocide and so on. But the genocide suggests a complete sort of there's no one left. They were all killed, which is what the genocide is meant to be, or there were, odd one or two left here or there, but an entire people were killed off, and that was considered to be the interpretation of genocide. Now, this has been expanded, and I was surprised to read some international legal determinations. Now, legal courts, whether they be the United Nations or the European Court of Human Rights or any of these sort of things, they're stacked, and I mean packed, with radical leftists who are consumed with notions of restorative justice, where facts and evidence and so on don't matter, because you're trying to compensate people, marginalized groups, for things that might have happened many hundreds of years ago, or believed to have happened, or presumed to have happened. And even those presumptions are through a very one-sided ideological lens. So they tend to not want strict definitions on words or phrases, because that limits their capacity to just arbitrarily and randomly move around to find a nice convenient spot to pervert the law even further, and to reverse the burden of proof, and to not have to rely on facts and evidence. And the word genocide is one of those ones. They needed control of that word, the activists, and so they set about redefining it, which is exactly what they've done. Now, there are numerous examples of this, and I'll come back to some others in a minute, but just for the moment on genocide, it's now they can presume, an international court can presume, or even an activist journalist for that matter, can presume the intent to commit genocide. Well, you actually didn't kill anybody. You killed a couple of people, but you intended to commit genocide, which means it is a genocide because we say you thought about it and intended to do it. Well, what evidence do you have that genocide was intended? Well, you were spitting on the sidewalk there. That we say that is an intention to commit genocide. So they can seize upon pretty much anything. And say, but that makes up some wider narrative of the intent to commit genocide. But we didn't kill a single. Doesn't matter. You intended to commit genocide. That's what, and we say it. Now, on that basis, because they're making the claim, which has legal weights, by the way, making the claim that, well, you intended to commit genocide, thus you are genocidal, and deny it, disprove it, and the trying to disprove something you haven't done, or well, we say you were thinking about it. Yeah, when you were dreaming last night in bed, we say you were dreaming of genocide. Disprove it, you Nazi motherfucker. And so there's a lot of presumption that goes into this, and vague allegations around what you intended to do or what you might have considered doing. And then using very sort of studies have shown that people that have countries that have, attack helicopters are inclined to genocide. So, Mr. Jones, does your country have it? Well, yeah, that's it. You fucking genocide on that. And so there you go. So an absolute minimum level of incidental and oblique supposed evidence is enough to say, well, that's it. That's proof you intended it. So the first allegation, you intended to do it, they can't prove. But the second one is, they say, the inputs to genocide, that you need to own a gun or a helicopter gunship or something, that you need to have that. Do you have that? Well, there you go. That's it. So done. You're as guilty as fuck. And of course, it's quite absurd, and you wonder how people have such radical activists, not all of whom are low IQ, by the way, how such radical activists sort of came to be omnipresent in all international courts, because they're the ones that can hurl these accusations. So when a journalist, crusading, so strong and tough journalist says, the highest international court in the planet, in the globe, in the universe, said that it was genocide, and we're supposed to, oh fuck, well, the court said, whoa. Not of course disclosing that the court is jam-packed full of screaming activists, none of whom give a flying fuck about the law, facts, or evidence, unless it suits them, of course. Now, we've seen this all over the Western world since the left's long march through the institutions, and what they've done in pretty much every instance, the courts in particular, is to simply redefine what words mean. And for example, anything that involves race or gender conflict is where they've been the most active in redefining words. So, say the word rape. What does it mean? Now, the word rape used to mean some sort of forcible action, holding a gun to their head, or the knife, or kidnapping and tying someone up. There had to be some sort of force, or realistic and threat of force, and then the forced sexual act, that was rape. But that's no longer the case. So if she had half a glass of wine too much, and they had fully consensual intimate relations, that's still rape, because she couldn't actually agree to the sexual relations because she had half a glass of wine too much. Thus, it is rape. So by redefining the word, what it means, and so, but when you intended to rape her, but I never did. But we say you intended to. Prove you didn't intend to. Well, gee, do you mind proving that I did intend? We don't have to. We're the moral authority here, motherfucker. Just prove you didn't, and so on. So once these words are redefined, whether it be genocide or rape or anything else, then they can, assuming it's vague enough, they can then insert intent. Well, you intended to do it. And you see this all over, say, the divorce courts. Father says, I'd like to see my children. Yeah, but you intend to abuse them. What? How do you know that? Yeah, but we say you intend to. Prove you don't intend to. What? How do I fucking do that? That's it. Prove enough you do. You fucking Nazi abuser. And so it goes on. So wherever you see race hustling or gender hustling, and there's no shortage of that in the Western world these days, then you see this redefinition of words. Now, something that's happened recently that's caused convulsions in multiple layers of narrative is where the Israeli government has launched what many are alleging is a disproportionate response to the Gazan attack on Israel in October. So what was that? When was that? Was that October 2024? I've even lost count. Anyway, the Gazan attack on Israel, which involved not only killing Israelis around there, but also kidnapping and apprehending and keeping hostages and all sorts of stuff like that. So the Israelis responded, unsurprisingly, by the way, they've been doing this for a long time, unsurprisingly responded with very considerable force. Now, at that point, the Gazans could have just, hey, we better release all hostages, better release all people, and beg forgiveness for this. But instead, they decide to keep the hostages and stick it out. And the Israelis say, we'll continue doing this until they're all released. the Jewish hostages, and yet the people in Gaza, the government or the gangs or whatever, whoever's in control in Gaza, say, nah, we're doing this. And obviously there was, we're quite happy if many Gazans die, because it gives us then the higher moral authority on the world stage. So clearly all these things were going on. And I've yet to see, maybe there is an interview, I haven't seen one yet, where the journalist says, well, look, the Israeli government said if you release all the hostages, the bombing and the whatnot will stop. Why don't you do it? I haven't seen such an interview. The reverse, of course, is the case. Well, why are you bombing these people? Little women and children, little girls dressed in pink are dying. How can you do it? And so there's, again, a lot of propaganda going around. And you'd have to say that the Islamic propaganda in and around what's happening in Gaza has been quite successful. It's they've managed to take the moral high ground from the Jews, who've had the moral high ground really since World War II, because they can just accuse anyone of being a Nazi that displeases them, and that gives them a huge amount of clout in ways that were impossible to even consider before World War II. But coming back to the definitions here, is the Israeli response to the Gazan attack genocidal? Well, no, it's not. So they've switched the narrative to say, well, the Israelis are intending to commit genocide. Now, that's something that's very hard to argue either for or against. So they show a few photographs of bombed out buildings. So there you go. There's the fucking genocide. But is it? I would argue not. Is the response out of proportion to the attack? Well, probably, but equally, the Gazans are not saying, well, here, you have your hostages back and please stop bombing us. They're almost saying, please bomb us, and, do as much as you can to attack us because we get moral high ground. But many hundreds of your people have died. Who cares? We're talking about a propaganda warfare, you silly motherfucker. So now I just want to sort of look at genocide sort of generally. There's things like the Armenian genocide. This is when the Turkish were supposedly wiping out the Armenians. Okay, so there's no Armenians left around that region. Well, no, there are millions of them. Well, how could it then be a genocide if there are millions of Armenians? Well, they killed a lot of them. Okay, well, that's all right then, concede that. But how is it a genocide if millions are still remaining? Well, hey, don't ask difficult questions, you fucking Nazi. And the same could be for the Rwandans. There's plenty of Rwandans left remaining. Were a lot killed? Well, sure. Was it a mass killing? Absolutely. Was it a genocide? Well, no, it fails to meet that original. Was the intention to kill off all the Rwandans? Well, we say it was, and we own the ideological high ground. No, prove it. No, prove it. Well, they intended to do it. No, that's bullshit. Was genocide committed or not? The same could be said for 1930s and 40s Central Europe. The Nazi government, the National Socialist government, had originally no intention of killing off any Jews. They wanted to deport them all. That was what they tried to do. And by the way, in Germany in the 1930s, there was only, out of a population of somewhere around 80 million, there was approximately 400,000 Jews in Germany. So we're talking, 1% of less than 1% of the population. So this idea that there were millions of Jews in Germany at that time is simply nonsense. And Hitler's government, first off, did everything they could to deport the Jews from Germany. There was no attempt to, and they found that many countries in the world, the United States included, were really unwilling to take Jews that weren't skilled or had money or had some sort of a trade or whatever. So people like Einstein and guys like that were okay, but the lesser skilled people weren't. So about 200,000 of the 400,000, so half, give or take, managed to emigrate to places like the United States and Britain and elsewhere. But the others, the less skilled ones, of course, this was the time of the Great Depression. So all countries had very severe restrictions on immigrants coming in because they had mass unemployment all around the place. So you had to be skilled and cashed up if you were going to get a migrant visa. This was rewritten in the years following, saying, well, the reason these Jews weren't accepted in is because of anti-Semitism and when in fact it wasn't. It was just mass unemployment and heavy restrictions on all people coming in who weren't skilled and again cashed up. So the intent wasn't there to commit genocide. Then it comes to the second phase where there were, particularly around Poland and so on, there were large Jewish populations, and many of them were sent to internment camps and so on. But as with the skilled Jews, because a lot of in say Holland, there are a lot of silversmiths, goldsmiths, jewelers, and people with a lot of skills in Jewish people with a lot of skills in various areas, and they tended to do all right, and they were put in internment camps that were also quasi factories really. So was there an intent to commit genocide? I would argue not, actually, in that time, and either they were very inefficient at it, the Nazis, or there were so many dispensations to Jews with technical skills in particular that the number of dispensations was vast, and therefore I would argue that genocide was not the intention of it, and therefore that would fail the test. But now we've got this thing where intent can be assumed or inferred, and it becomes part of the so-called, we say that you would. Well, because you look sideways on a Sunday, and we say looking sideways on a Sunday means you intended to commit genocide. Therefore, you intended to do it. It is therefore genocide, and therefore you have to prove you did, and so on. So this creates just an absolute mockery of the law, and it's clearly just used as advice to go after people they don't like. January 6th is an example in the United States, but you intended to commit an insurrection. What? You fucking morons. There was no such intent. But when they can accuse you of intent, they can then accuse you of the crime simply by reinterpreting what the word means. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.